In the dusty hills of West Texas, where hope can be as scarce as rain and miracles often come disguised as the simplest acts of kindness, unfolds a story that will forever change how you view the bonds between humans and animals. This is the incredible tale of Garrett McAllister, a struggling rancher who made a decision that seemed foolish to everyone around him, but proved that sometimes the smallest investments yield the greatest returns. If you're ready for a story that will restore your faith in the power of compassion and the unexpected ways love finds us, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more amazing tales that celebrate the human spirit. Don't forget to let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We love connecting with our incredible global community. A $2 gamble. The autumn livestock auction in Sweetwater, Texas, was winding down on a particularly brutal October afternoon in 2018, when most of the serious buyers had already loaded their trailers and headed home. The temperature had reached 96 degrees, unusual even for Texas in late fall, and the dust kicked up by hundreds of hooves had turned the air into a gritty haze that made everyone's eyes water. Garrett McAllister sat in the back row of the metal bleachers, his weathered cowboy hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too many disappointments in his 43 years. His wife, Sarah, had died of complications from diabetes 2 years earlier, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old daughter, Melody, alone while trying to keep their 400-acre ranch afloat on income that seemed to shrink every month. The Double M Ranch, named for McAllister and Melody, had been in his family for 3 generations, but Garrett was beginning to fear he might be the last. Medical bills from Sarah's illness had consumed their savings, and the drought that had gripped West Texas for the past 18 months had forced him to sell most of his cattle just to keep food on the table and electricity running to the modest ranch house where he and Melody lived. "Lot 247. The auctioneer called out, his voice hoarse from hours of rapid-fire bidding. "One donkey Jenny, approximately 12 years old. She's had better days, folks, but might make a decent companion animal for someone." Garrett looked up from the notebook where he'd been calculating whether he could afford to bid on a young bull calf, and his attention was immediately caught by the sorry sight being led into the auction ring. The donkey was painfully thin, her grey coat dull and patchy, her head hanging so low it seemed she might collapse at any moment. Her ribs were clearly visible, and there was a defeated quality to her posture that spoke of neglect and abandonment. "She's not much to look at," the auctioneer continued, "but she's got papers saying she's healthy enough. Who'll give me $20 to start?" Silence filled the auction barn. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no hands went up. The donkey stood perfectly still in the center of the ring, as if she understood that her fate was being decided by strangers who saw no value in her. $15? The auctioneer tried again. "Come on, folks. She'd make good company for horses. Keep the coyotes away from your property." And still nothing. Garrett found himself staring at the animal, something about her dignified resignation reminding him of his own struggles. He thought about Melody, who had been begging for a pet since her mother died, though they'd never been able to afford anything beyond the barn cats that came and went as they pleased. $10. The auctioneer's voice was becoming impatient. "She's headed for the meat truck if nobody wants her." That phrase hit Garrett like a physical blow. The meat truck. This animal, who had clearly once been someone's beloved pet or working companion, was going to be destroyed simply because she was old and tired, and nobody could see past her rough exterior. $5, the auctioneer called out, his tone suggesting this was the final offer before moving on. Garrett surprised himself by raising his hand. $2. A ripple of laughter went through the small crowd of remaining buyers. Someone behind him muttered, "McAllister's lost his mind," and another voice added, "Man can't afford feed for himself, wants to buy a dying donkey." The auctioneer looked puzzled but nodded. "I've got $2 on the Jenny. Anyone else?" The barn fell silent again. After a moment that felt like an eternity, the auctioneer brought down his gavel. "Sold to the gentleman in the back for $2. As Garrett made his way down to complete the paperwork and arrange transportation, He questioned his own sanity. $2 wasn't much money, but it was $2 he could have spent on feed for his remaining livestock, or saved toward the electric bill that was due next week. What was he going to do with a sick donkey? "You sure about this, Garrett?" asked Pete Hendricks, who ran the auction house and had known the McAllister family for 20 years. "That animal's in rough shape. Might not last the week." "Maybe not," Garrett admitted, signing the bill of sale. "But she deserves a chance to die with dignity, at least. And maybe she's got more fight in her than people think." The trailer ride back to the Double M Ranch was quiet except for the sound of the donkey's hooves shifting on the metal floor as Garrett navigated the county roads that led home. He'd called ahead to let Melody know he was bringing home a surprise, though he was already regretting the decision and wondering how he was going to explain to his daughter that her new pet might not survive very long. Melody was waiting by the gate when Garrett pulled into the ranch yard. Her dark hair pulled back in the practical ponytail she'd learned to manage herself since her mother's death. At 8 years old, she had already developed the kind of independence that comes from necessity, helping with chores and cooking simple meals while her father worked from dawn to dusk, trying to keep their small operation viable. "What did you bring me, Daddy?" she called out, bouncing on her toes with the excitement that only children can summon for unexpected gifts. "Well, kiddo," Garrett said, climbing down from the truck cab, "it's not exactly what you might expect, but I thought maybe we could use some company around here." He opened the trailer gate and gently coaxed the donkey down the ramp. In the better light of the ranch yard, she looked even worse than she had at the auction. Her coat was not just dull, but had patches of what looked like old mange. Her hooves were overgrown and cracked, and her eyes held the vacant stare of an animal that had given up hope. But Melody's reaction was not what Garrett had feared. Instead of disappointment or concern, her face lit up with pure joy. "She's beautiful, Daddy. What's her name?" "I don't know if she has one," Garrett said carefully. "And, honey, I need to tell you something. She's not very healthy right now. We're going to take the best care of her we can, but she needs us," Melody interrupted, approaching the donkey with the fearless confidence of childhood. "I can tell. She's been sad for a long time, but she's going to be happy here." The donkey lifted her head slightly as Melody drew near, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When the little girl gently placed her hand on the animal's neck, the donkey didn't pull away. "I'm going to call her Luna," Melody announced, "because she's gray like the moon, and because she's going to be the most important thing in our sky." That night, after they'd settled Luna in the small paddock near the barn with fresh water and hay, Garrett sat on the porch watching his daughter through the kitchen window as she did her homework. For the first time since Sarah's death, Melody seemed truly happy about something, and that alone made the $2 investment worthwhile. He had no idea that within days, Luna would prove to be worth far more than her weight in gold. The slow healing. 3 weeks after Luna's arrival at the Double M Ranch, the transformation was nothing short of remarkable, and not just in the donkey. Dr. Angela Rivera, the large animal veterinarian who served the scattered ranches around Sweetwater, had initially been skeptical when Garrett called to arrange an examination for his new acquisition. "A $2 donkey from the Sweetwater auction?" she'd said over the phone. "Garrett, you know I'll always come out for you, but I hope you're not expecting miracles." But when Dr. Rivera arrived at the ranch that first Friday morning, she found herself genuinely surprised by what she saw. Luna was still thin and rough-looking, but she was alert and responsive in ways that suggested her condition was more due to neglect than serious illness. "Well, I'll be damned, Doctor," Rivera muttered as she completed her examination, running practiced hands over Luna's ribs and checking her hooves. "She's got good bone structure under all this rough exterior. This is a quality animal who's just been having a hard time." Melody, who had insisted on being present for the examination despite having to miss the school bus, peppered the veterinarian with questions. "Is she going to be okay? What can we do to make her feel better? Why is her coat so patchy?" Dr. Rivera smiled at the little girl's intensity. She's going to be just fine with proper care. The patchy coat is from poor nutrition and stress, but it'll grow back. The overgrown hooves need trimming, and she needs to gain about 60 pounds, but there's nothing here that good food and attention won't cure. How long will it take? Melody asked. Give it 3 months, Dr. Rivera said. By Christmas, you won't recognize her. As autumn progressed into winter, Dr. Rivera's prediction proved accurate. Under Melody's devoted care and Garrett's careful management of her diet, Luna began to bloom. Her coat grew in thick and lustrous, revealing a beautiful silver-grey color with darker points on her ears and legs. Her eyes brightened and became alert, following the movements of her human family with obvious affection. Most importantly, her personality began to emerge, gentle but intelligent, patient with Melody's constant attention, but clearly bonded to both father and daughter. The change in Melody was equally dramatic. The quiet, serious child, who had shouldered responsibilities far beyond her years, began to laugh again, spending every free moment in Luna's paddock, chattering about her day at school or her plans for the weekend. She read to Luna from her favorite books, practiced her spelling words out loud while grooming the donkey's improving coat, and even convinced her father to let Luna walk with them to check the property lines on weekend mornings. That donkey's the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years, observed Floyd Jameson, their elderly neighbor, who often stopped by to check on Garrett and Melody. Haven't seen that little girl so happy since before her mama got sick. But it was Luna's intelligence that truly impressed everyone who met her. Unlike horses, who could be skittish and unpredictable, or cattle, who were often single-minded about food and territory, Luna seemed to genuinely understand human emotions and respond accordingly. When Melody was sad about missing her mother, Luna would rest her head gently against the girl's shoulder. When Garrett was stressed about bills or weather, Luna would approach him quietly and simply stand nearby, offering silent companionship. Donkeys are different from other livestock, Dr. Rivera explained during one of her follow-up visits. They're prey animals, but they're also incredibly intelligent and loyal. In many cultures, they're considered sacred because they can sense things other animals miss. The truth of that statement became apparent in ways none of them expected. It started with small things. Luna would become agitated when strangers approached the property, alerting Garrett to visitors long before he would have noticed them himself. She seemed to be able to predict weather changes, becoming restless and seeking shelter hours before storms arrived. Most unusually, she developed a habit of positioning herself between Melody and potential dangers, a loose board in the fence, a hole in the ground, even an aggressive rooster that had taken to terrorizing the chickens. It's like she thinks her job is protecting Melody, Garrett told Dr. Rivera during a routine visit in late November. Yesterday, she wouldn't let Melody go near the old water tank by the south pasture, kept pushing herself between them and making that worried noise donkeys make. Dr. Rivera nodded thoughtfully. I'd check that tank if I were you. Donkeys have incredible instincts about danger. When Garrett investigated, he found that the tank's support structure had rotted through and was ready to collapse. If Melody had climbed on it, as she often did during their walks, she could have been seriously injured. But Luna's most remarkable demonstration of intelligence and loyalty was yet to come. December in West Texas brought an unusual cold snap, with temperatures dropping into the teens and staying there for days at a time. The ranch, like most in the area, wasn't equipped for sustained freezing weather, and Garrett found himself struggling to keep water tanks from freezing and ensure that his remaining livestock stayed warm. On December 15th, a particularly brutal storm system moved through the region, bringing not just frigid temperatures, but also ice that made travel dangerous and knocked out power lines across 3 counties. The Double M Ranch lost electricity around midnight, and by morning, the temperature inside the house had dropped to barely above freezing. Garrett's first priority was getting the wood-burning stove in the living room operational, but the chimney hadn't been used in years and needed cleaning before it would be safe. His second priority was checking on Luna and the other animals, making sure they had access to unfrozen water and adequate shelter. What he found when he reached Luna's paddock made his blood run cold. During the night, a large tree branch, heavy with ice, had fallen across the paddock fence, creating a gap large enough for Luna to escape. But she hadn't escaped. Instead, she was standing guard over something near the water tank, and she was clearly agitated. As Garrett approached, he realized what had happened. Melody, worried about Luna during the storm, had apparently snuck out of the house during the night to check on her beloved donkey. But the ice had made the ground treacherous, and somewhere near the water tank she had slipped and fallen, hitting her head on the concrete base hard enough to lose consciousness. Luna had positioned herself over the unconscious child, using her own body to provide warmth and protection from the continuing ice storm. How long she had been standing there, Garrett couldn't say, but her coat was thick with ice, and she was shivering violently from the cold. Yet she hadn't moved from her post, and when Garrett approached, she looked at him with eyes that clearly communicated urgency and relief. "Easy, girl," Garrett whispered, kneeling beside his daughter and checking for vital signs. Melody was breathing, but her skin was dangerously cold, and there was a nasty bump on the side of her head where she'd struck the concrete. If Luna hadn't been there, hadn't used her body to shield Melody from the worst of the storm, there was no question that the little girl would have died from exposure during that brutal night. As it was, she was suffering from hypothermia and a concussion, but she was alive. The next few hours were a blur of emergency calls, a treacherous drive to the hospital in Sweetwater, and anxious waiting while doctors evaluated Melody's condition. But throughout the ordeal, Garrett kept thinking about Luna standing guard over his daughter, refusing to seek shelter for herself because something more important needed protection. When they finally returned home 3 days later, Melody sporting a dramatic bandage on her head, but otherwise fine, the first thing she wanted to do was see Luna. "She saved my life, didn't she, Daddy?" Melody asked as they stood in the paddock, Luna nuzzling gently against the girl's uninjured cheek. "She did, kiddo," Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "She absolutely did." That night, as Melody slept safely in her own bed and Luna rested comfortably in the barn where Garrett had moved her for the remainder of the cold weather, the rancher found himself thinking about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A $2 gamble on a dying donkey had saved his daughter's life. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important investments are the ones that don't make sense to anyone else. A community awakens. Word of Luna's heroic actions spread through Sweetwater County like wildfire, transforming what had been a simple story of animal rescue into something approaching legend. By New Year's Day 2019, the McAllister Ranch was receiving visitors from as far away as Dallas and Houston, people who wanted to meet the donkey who had saved a little girl's life and the family who had rescued her from certain death. The attention was overwhelming for Garrett, who had always been a private man, but it brought unexpected opportunities. Sarah Chen, a reporter from the San Antonio Express-News, arrived on a crisp January morning to write a feature story about Luna, and her article would eventually change everything for the struggling ranch. "What made you bid on her that day?" Sarah asked as they stood in Luna's paddock, watching Melody brush the donkey's now lustrous coat. Garrett was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain a decision that had seemed foolish to everyone around him. "I guess I saw something in her that reminded me of myself," he said finally. "Sometimes all any of us need is someone to believe we're worth saving." The newspaper story, published on February 14th with the headline, "Love Saves," how a $2 donkey rescued a Texas family, went viral on social media within hours. Suddenly, the Double M Ranch was receiving phone calls from across the country, people wanting to visit, to adopt rescued animals, to learn more about the bond between Luna and Melody. But it was the call from Margaret Whitfield that truly changed their trajectory. Margaret owned Whitfield Sanctuary, a 2,000-acre facility outside Austin that specialized in rescuing and rehabilitating farm animals. She'd built her operation over 20 years into one of the most respected animal sanctuaries in the Southwest, and she had connections throughout the agricultural and animal welfare communities. "Mr. McAllister," she said during their first phone conversation, "I've been following your story, and I have a proposition that might interest you. Would you be willing to consider partnering with us to create a satellite sanctuary on your property?" The idea was ambitious, but practical. Whitfield Sanctuary was at capacity, turning away animals that needed homes, while the Double M Ranch had plenty of land, but lacked the financial resources to expand beyond subsistence farming. A partnership would provide Garrett with steady income, Melody with the animal-filled environment she clearly thrived in, and dozens of rescued animals with safe, permanent homes. "We'd help you build proper facilities," Margaret explained during her visit to the ranch in March. "Provide veterinary support, training, even marketing assistance. In return, you'd house and care for animals we place with you, and we'd share the operational costs." Melody, who had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Would Luna like having more donkey friends?" Margaret smiled at the 8-year-old's directness. "I think she would. Donkeys are social animals. She's probably been lonely." The transformation began immediately. By late spring, construction crews were building new barns, fencing additional pastures, and installing water systems that could support a much larger animal population. The first residents arrived in May, 3 elderly horses rescued from a neglect situation, 2 goats who had been abandoned at a veterinary clinic, and most importantly, for Luna, another donkey named Diego, who had been surrendered by owners who could no longer care for him. The bonding between Luna and Diego was immediate and touching. Within hours of his arrival, they were grazing side by side, and by the end of the week, they were inseparable. Watching them together, Garrett realized that Margaret had been right. Luna had been lonely, and having a companion of her own species brought out aspects of her personality they'd never seen before. But the real magic happened when children began visiting the sanctuary. Word had spread about Luna's story, and schools, youth groups, and families dealing with their own challenges started requesting tours. Melody, initially shy about her role as Luna's primary caretaker, gradually became comfortable speaking to groups about animal care, the importance of rescue work, and the special bond she shared with her donkey. "Luna teaches people that everyone deserves a second chance," Melody told a group of 4th graders from Sweetwater Elementary during one memorable visit. "She was sick and sad when we got her, but look at her now. Sometimes you just have to be patient and kind, and amazing things happen." Dr. Rivera, who had become the sanctuary's primary veterinarian, was amazed by the changes in both the animals and the people who cared for them. "Garrett's always been a good rancher," she told Margaret during one of their planning meetings, "but this work has given him a purpose beyond just survival. And Melody, that child has a gift with animals that's rare at any age." The financial transformation was equally dramatic. The partnership with Whitfield Sanctuary provided steady income that allowed Garrett to pay off the medical debts that had been crushing him since Sarah's death. Additional revenue came from educational tours, a small gift shop that Melody helped manage, and donations from people who had been touched by Luna's story. But perhaps the most significant change was in Garrett himself. The grief and stress that had weighed him down for 2 years began to lift as he found himself surrounded by new purpose and community support. The sanctuary work connected him with other families, other children, and gradually he began to build the kind of social network that he'd lost track of during Sarah's illness and death. "You're different, Dad," Melody observed one evening as they completed the evening animal care routine together. "You smile more now." Garrett considered his daughter's words as they walked from paddock to paddock, checking water and hay, ensuring that each animal was comfortable for the night. The work was more demanding than simple cattle ranching had been, but it was also more fulfilling. Every animal they saved, every child they educated, every family that found healing through interaction with rescued animals, added meaning to days that had once felt like mere survival. "I think," he said finally, "that taking care of Luna taught me how to take care of myself again, and taking care of all these animals taught me how to take care of our community." As summer progressed, the sanctuary hosted its first major fundraising event, a barbecue and auction that brought together ranchers, animal lovers, and families from across the region. Luna, now completely transformed from the dying donkey Garrett had purchased for $2, served as the unofficial greeter, approaching visitors with the calm confidence of an animal who knew she was loved and valued. The event raised enough money to fund expansion plans for the following year, but more importantly, it established the Double M Sanctuary as a permanent fixture in the community. Children who had visited on school trips brought their families back for weekend visits. Adults who had initially been skeptical about the donkey sanctuary found themselves volunteering to help with feeding, grooming, and maintenance work. "What you've built here," Margaret Whitfield told Garrett, as they watched Melody lead a group of children through the sanctuary's educational program, "is more than an animal rescue operation. It's a healing place for everyone who needs it." That evening, as the last visitors departed and the sanctuary settled into its nighttime quiet, Garrett stood in Luna's paddock reflecting on the incredible journey that had begun with a $2 bid at a livestock auction. The donkey, who had once been hours away from destruction, was now the foundation of an operation that was saving dozens of animals and touching hundreds of lives. Luna approached him as she always did, resting her head gently against his shoulder while they watched the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, Melody was calling the animals in for their evening feed, her voice carrying across the pastures with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Sometimes, Garrett reflected, the most important investments are the ones that don't make sense to anyone else. And sometimes, saving something that seems worthless teaches you the true value of everything you thought you'd lost. The legacy lives on. 2 years after that life-changing December night when Luna had stood guard over an unconscious Melody, the Double M Sanctuary had become a beacon of hope that drew visitors from across the United States. What had started as a simple partnership with Whitfield Sanctuary had evolved into something much larger, a model for how rural communities could thrive by embracing both traditional values and innovative approaches to land use and animal welfare. The numbers told part of the story. The sanctuary now housed 47 rescued animals across 500 acres, employed 6 full-time staff members, and hosted over 10,000 visitors annually. But the real measure of success wasn't in statistics. It was in the transformed lives of animals, children and families who had found healing and purpose within the sanctuary's boundaries. Melody, now 10 years old and clearly growing into her role as the sanctuary's youngest educator, had developed a reputation throughout the region for her ability to connect troubled children with the healing power of animal relationships. Her program, Luna's Friends, paired at-risk youth with rescued animals, creating bonds that often proved transformative for both species. "Animals don't judge you," she explained to a new group of participants during one of her weekly sessions. "They don't care if you've made mistakes or if you're different from other kids. They just care if you're kind to them. And when you learn to be kind to animals, you learn to be kind to yourself too." Dr. Rivera, who had watched Melody grow from a grieving 8-year-old into a confident young animal advocate, was continually amazed by the girl's intuitive understanding of both animal and human psychology. "She has a gift that can't be taught," the veterinarian told visiting educators who came to study the sanctuary's programs. "But more than that, she has the wisdom to use that gift in service of others." Luna remained the sanctuary's star resident, but her role had evolved beyond that of a simple rescued animal. She had become a therapy animal, working with children who had experienced trauma, loss, or social challenges. Her gentle nature and obvious intelligence made her particularly effective with young people who struggled to trust adults, and her story of transformation gave hope to families facing their own seemingly impossible challenges. The partnership between Luna and Melody had also deepened in ways that continued to surprise everyone who observed them. The donkey seemed to understand when the girl was having difficult days, missing her mother, struggling with schoolwork, or simply dealing with the normal challenges of growing up, and would seek her out to provide comfort. In return, Melody had developed an almost telepathic ability to sense when Luna or any of the other animals needed attention, medical care, or simply companionship. "They've taught each other," Garrett observed to Margaret Whitfield during one of her regular visits to check on the sanctuary's progress. Melody learned patience and empathy from Luna, and Luna learned to trust humans again through Melody's love. Now they both use those lessons to help others. The sanctuary's success had also attracted attention from agricultural and educational institutions across the country. Texas A&M University's veterinary school had established an internship program at the facility, allowing students to gain hands-on experience with rescue animals while contributing to the sanctuary's educational mission. The state's Department of Agriculture had designated the Double M as a model for sustainable rural development, showcasing how traditional ranching operations could diversify to serve broader community needs. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the community itself. Sweetwater County, which had been struggling with population decline and economic challenges for decades, was experiencing a revival directly tied to the sanctuary's presence. Local businesses reported increased tourism revenue. Young families were choosing to stay in the area rather than migrate to urban centers, and property values had stabilized for the first time in years. "Garrett didn't just save a donkey," reflected Floyd Jameson during a community meeting about rural development. "He saved our whole county by showing us that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones other people throw away." The transformation wasn't limited to economics. The sanctuary had become a gathering place for the community, hosting everything from school field trips to senior citizen programs to support groups for families dealing with grief and loss. The healing that Luna had begun in one small family had rippled outward to touch hundreds of lives. On a warm October evening in 2020, exactly 2 years after the night Luna had saved Melody's life, the sanctuary hosted its annual benefit dinner, an event that had grown from a simple barbecue to a sophisticated fundraiser that drew supporters from across Texas. As the sun set over the pastures where rescued animals grazed peacefully, Garrett found himself standing with Luna in the same spot where he'd discovered his unconscious daughter that terrifying December night. "Hard to believe it's been 2 years, he said to the donkey, who stood quietly beside him as if she understood the significance of the moment. Melody joined them, carrying a carrot she'd brought as an evening treat for Luna. At 10, she was tall for her age and carried herself with a confidence that spoke of someone who had found her calling early in life. "Luna," she said, offering the carrot and stroking the donkey's neck, "do you remember that night when you saved my life?" The donkey accepted the treat and rested her head against Melody's shoulder in the gesture that had become their special form of communication. "I think she does," Garrett said. "But I also think she knows that night was just the beginning. Everything good that's happened since then started with her decision to stand guard over you." As they walked back toward the main buildings, where the evening celebration was winding down and volunteers were beginning the cleanup process, Garrett reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A $2 gamble on a dying donkey had not only saved his daughter's life, but had transformed their struggling ranch into a thriving sanctuary that was changing lives throughout their community. "Dad," Melody said as they approached the barn where Luna would spend the night, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that, kiddo?" "When I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian. But I also want to keep doing this, saving animals and helping kids. Do you think there's a way to do both?" Garrett smiled, thinking about Dr. Rivera, who had become not just the sanctuary's veterinarian, but also one of its most passionate advocates. "I think," he said, that if anyone can figure out how to do both, it's you. That night, as the sanctuary settled into quiet and the rescued animals rested safely in their barns and pastures, Garrett stood on his porch, looking out over land that had been transformed by love, patience, and the wisdom to recognize value where others saw only waste. In the distance, he could hear Luna's contented snuffling as she settled in for the night, surrounded by the friends and family who valued her not for what she could produce or perform, but simply for who she was. The dying donkey, who had cost him $2, had given him back his life, his daughter's future, and his community's hope. Sometimes, Garrett reflected, the most important investments are the ones that don't make sense to anyone else. And sometimes, the act of saving something that seems worthless teaches you the true value of everything you thought you'd lost. In the barn, Luna rested peacefully, unaware that her story was being shared online by thousands of people who had been touched by the tale of a rancher's faith and a donkey's love. But perhaps she sensed that her life had meaning beyond her own survival, that her presence at the Double M Sanctuary was creating ripples of healing that would continue long after her own time on Earth was done. And in the house where 3 generations of McAllisters had called home, a father and daughter planned for a future filled with possibility, their lives forever changed by the simple decision to see value where others saw waste and to choose love over logic in a moment when it mattered most. The story of Garrett McAllister and Luna proves that miracles often come disguised as the most ordinary moments. A struggling rancher at a livestock auction, a dying donkey that nobody wanted, a $2 decision that changed everything. What began as a simple act of compassion grew into a legacy that transformed not just one family, but an entire community. Today, the Double M Sanctuary continues to thrive, housing over 60 rescued animals and welcoming thousands of visitors annually. Melody, now pursuing her dream of becoming a veterinarian while continuing her work with Luna's Friends program, has become a powerful advocate for animal welfare and child development. And Luna, healthy and content at 14 years old, continues to work as a therapy animal, touching lives and proving daily that every creature deserves a chance at happiness. But perhaps the most important lesson from their journey is this: sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that others have discarded. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures or expensive solutions, but from the simple willingness to see worth where others see waste, to choose compassion over convenience, and to believe that love can indeed work miracles. The rancher who spent $2 on a dying donkey discovered that the greatest investments aren't measured in money, but in the lives they touch and the love they create. And the donkey who was hours away from destruction became the foundation of a legacy that will continue healing hearts and saving lives for generations to come. If this incredible story of second chances and the transformative power of love touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles happen every day. Subscribe for more amazing tales that celebrate the bond between humans and animals and the incredible things that happen when we choose compassion over convenience. Don't forget to let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We love hearing from our global family who believes in the power of kindness. Have you ever rescued an animal or been rescued by one? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly the inspiration someone else needs to hear today. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in the world.